The following is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the Force Center podcast feed. I'm Ken Napsol.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And I'm Jennifer Landa.
The trio is here. The gang is all here. And we are looking at Star Wars news, breaking news from a long time ago. We've got some fun news, some speculation, some Instagram profile changes, and some creatures of the galaxy to talk about. Before we get to all that today, I want to remind you that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/forcecenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. A little bit later, as always, we have our Force Center recommends an audiobook we think you should try out on us. And before we see the return of Star Wars and Life Adventures, which we always appreciate those who are like, hey, you didn't do it this week. But with the Mando trailer last week, we wanted to get right to the main course of the meal. But before we get to that, we do want to remind you, we do have a humble ask, Joseph. We have an ask into the galaxy.
That is right, and we are making such good traction on this ask. We are trying to build to 7,000 subscribers on YouTube very soon. Our new YouTube-only show, Figure Fights, where we have two different Star Wars action figures battle one another. That will be premiering soon on YouTube, as well as some other upcoming adventures. And we want to have as many friends with us as possible on YouTube. We've been asking to get to 7,000 subscribers for a couple weeks now, and it keeps being like this Titanic story of there'll be a huge surge when we, yes, we've got it. And then, oh no, there's a second act twist, and we go down a little bit, and then we're underdogs. We shoot back up. And right now we're at just under 100 more subscribers to reach this goal. When we reach this goal, not only will we have accomplished something, but you, the listener, will be rewarded by, we'll ask for something else, and it will change up this segment of the show.
That is right. Ask and maybe change the ask if you help. But we appreciate all your support. We really do. We want to also let you know it is up and out there if you want to get into your calendar. But our next live show, we do our monthly Q&A, January 27th, 3 p.m. Pacific time. We moved it up an hour. We're trying to find a good time that we can incorporate all of our listeners around the world. So we'll be doing some special ones as well earlier in the day. But that might help some of you there, but also aligns with our schedules as well. The realities of podcasting and scheduling are very strong. All right, let's catch up on Star Wars and Life Adventures. Joseph, I know you had a big one, so we'll keep you in the main event slot here. But Jen, how are you?
I'm good. I didn't have too many Star Wars adventures. I'm in the mode of cleaning right now. I'm trying to declutter our house. And what I realize is I have a lot of Star Wars things, plushes that my kids, they kind of like. I mean, there's some that they love, like the galactic creatures. They really love those. The Ewok, the Wookiee. Those aren't going anywhere. But there's like a Porg that they're kind of over, and there's a couple other things. And I was like, I can't get rid of those. Why? Because they're mine. They're mine, and I'm not going to get rid of them. I'm not going to take them to the Goodwill. But something that actually just happened this morning, I was listening to the Smart List podcast, and Steven Spielberg was on there, and he was talking about how he and Alan Ladd Jr. were the only ones after watching that first screening that really thought that George Lucas had something. He said that after that first screening, he said the screening was kind of a mess. No sound effects, no visual effects, actors on blue screens, no, the pew pew. Mm-hmm. And then when there was like a space fight, it would cut to these, old World War movies. You guys all know that story. But he said it was a mess, but he really bought into it. And he said nobody else did. And they went to a restaurant afterwards, and everyone just was coming down on it, saying how terrible it was. And he's like, I thought George was onto something. And it just was really neat to hear about these two old friends. And I highly recommend that episode after listening to this episode.
Yes. I want to go to that restaurant. I bet it was like a hamburger Hamlet, right?
It was a Chinese restaurant. Restaurant.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's quite an image of just people shoveling in, delicious dishes, as they tell George Lucas. Nah.
Yeah, he said it was terrible. He's like, they all just kind of sat there. Then afterwards, everyone was just like dogging him, So that movie was going to be terrible. He's like, who are these characters? Why should we care about them? Like, can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I have to give a recommendation for the film The Fabelmans, which is Spielberg's sort of biographical picture. But there's so many great ideas about wanting to tell stories and wanting to see kind of fantastic things on screen. And that has given me so much more appreciation for Spielberg. Not that I was ever like, who's this Spielberg guy? The guy who created all these movies, but just that makes so much sense that he would be able to see, like, we're trying to create these fantastic adventures that you can't see anywhere else. We want wonder, that he would be coming. He's so aligned with Lucas in that respect that we want to see wonder. We want to see what we can't see that somehow reveals truth about ourselves, that he would be able to see the genius in its imperfect form.
Yes.
I love that. I love that take. And then you got old Laddie sitting there in the corner going, yeah, I'll invest in George. It's a good time.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great nostalgic trip there, Jen. I also, just hearing you just talk about how, that period of time when like the toys, certain toys or collectibles or plushes, like you said, the kids kind of move on. I'm thinking back to toys in my life, and I remember that happened. And it was kind of sad, I was, even as a kid at 8, I'm like, oh, this is probably the last time I'll play with this stuffed koala bear. Oh, going away and moving on to other things. I got a skateboard now.
Right. And my parents held on to all of my old stuff. And I'm like, am I going to be a bad parent if I don't hold on to these old things that they love now? Or, I don't have the space. Like, I don't know what to do. So
that is another podcast.
Yeah, right. The Star Wars stuff is staying. That's not going anywhere.
Yes. My parents did keep a lot of things, but there's some things I lost. But yeah, there's those stories. Yeah, Grandma threw away my Mickey Mantle rookie card. Gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Right.
My dream is that we someday have a Force Center recording studio, and you pan away from our little recording studio space, and the rest of it is just like the vault at the end of Indiana Jones, and it's just boxes and boxes of our Star Wars stuff.
We do need that. That. My Star Wars adventures are pretty simple. Though I did start. When I want some comfort, if I don't want a Star Wars movie, but I want to just kind of stay in Star Wars Galaxy, I love putting on those documentaries. So I was watching the one Connect with Rise of Skywalker, the one about the Skywalker saga and the legacy and everything there, the making of 9 and beyond, and just got about halfway through. I was doing some work, and it's just so nice to just hang out with friends as they're making Star Wars. It feels that's what those docs feel like. One thing happened to me though, I never give up hope. I have our old pals Alex and Steve and Cisco from the Black Strays Rebels. I don't think they do it as much anymore, but they used to make those enamel pins. So I have a bunch of them, and two of my favorites are my Han and my Leia. I wear them on my jacket. And I went to a birthday party on New Year's Eve. My friend Zara had her birthday, so I went over there, and it was a rainy night. The next day, I realized my Leia pin had fallen off. And, and I could probably text Alex or Steve and be like, hey, do you have any other ones laying around? But they'd kind of cleared out their merch and stock a while ago. And so I was like, I don't know. So I was like, I'll just see what happens. And lo and behold, this past week, Grace comes in, goes, look what I found. It was in the little cubby on the side of her car door. The backing had been out, but Leia was there. So what does this mean? Hope. You never give up hope and always bet on Leia. That was my lesson for the week.
That would be a great story if it was a Walrus Man pin, but it's an even better story that it's Leia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, the easy answer is I probably could have, Alex is a little too far. I could have knocked on his door, but like, you got some Leias around, but it was like, that's the one I've had for a long time. And I've worn it to premieres, to comedy shows. I have the Han and Leia one on representing Grace and I and everything. And then, to have it on one of the rainiest nights we've had in a long time. It's like, it's gone. It's probably somewhere in a gutter in West Hollywood. But nope, it was with me all along.
Yay.
Yay, indeed. Joseph, you had some wonderful adventures. Which actually I benefited from. We'll talk about. But how was your time at Disneyland, Galaxy's Edge, and beyond?
Yeah, I had a really great time. This was a massive amount of Star Wars adventures at Disneyland. My wife's parents, my in-laws, came to visit and wanted us to go to Disneyland for 3 days because they haven't been there in 4 decades.
Wow.
So I kind of thought like, wow, I've only ever been to Disneyland one long day. I've never been there 3 days. I bet I'll get sick of this. I was deeply wrong. It was a great experience because I needed to help make sure that everything worked really well for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I really mastered that app and really started to go in deep. And I explained how the pins work at Disneyland to them. And then I became pin crazy. And it was a really great, just sort of a Disneyland experience. But then along with that, because we were there for 3 days, we got to do things multiple times. We went on Star Tours 4 times. And saw 4 different combinations of things, of characters and planets. Amazing. We went on the Falcon twice, and I got to pilot it both times. Both sides of the pilot's thing, which was probably one of the greatest Star Wars adventures I've ever had. The second time we went on the Smuggler's Run flight, if anybody hasn't been, there's 2 pilots, 2 gunners, and 2 engineers. And we just got assigned. We were rushed through the first time. We're like, your pilots, go. Okay, great. Okay. The second time, I really didn't want to be a jerk and be like, I'm going to be the pilot. So there are these 2 other people with us because there's a total of 6. And we said to them like, hey, do you want to be the pilots? And they were like, please, no, we don't. We barely know what this is. We think we've seen Star Wars once. What do we have to do? We thought we have to do something. I thought it was a ride.
Yeah.
So like, be the gunners. That's fun. And they're like, thank you for being the pilots. And then they were so all in. They were like cheering us on as the pilots. They were so supportive. So I was able to totally role play in it. And I was the right pilot on that one, which is the one that gets to reach up and grab the jump to light speed sticks and pull them down. And they were so into it that the second time I just screamed out, I'm punching it. And they were like, yeah, punch it. And it was like, it was a total Star Wars dream to be like, not only am I being a ridiculous nerd, but I have total support from strangers for it.
That's the best.
So that was one of the best Star Wars experiences. It rained a little bit and I found the way to get into Oga's Cantina. So we're able to go into Oga's Cantina and slam back some jet juice. All that was great. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on because I had a ton of great adventures. So maybe I'll dole some out over the weeks. But the more Star Wars life lesson is little Leia. Like, I think because I was in the mindset that I was helping other people, that I was facilitating this trip for everybody, it really brought down the barriers for me to be like, if we have a problem, just ask. Find the closest person and ask. And we got so much more done because we weren't trying to figure it out, or we weren't, ashamed to ask and feel like, oh, maybe people will think we don't know what we're doing. And it just reminded me of all of the great energy of little Leia in Kenobi to be like, well, we need help. Let's go. Let's just ask, and that will make it better. And I had so many great experiences and conversations. And in fact, asking ended up making me feel more competent because I need this. I need help from somebody else. They give me help, and now I can help these other people that I'm here to help, which is, in this case, Sarah's parents.
Wonderful, big lessons and day big lessons, day drinking and Dole Whip and churros. What a time!
Really is really great adventures. The sour cherry churro is not right, but it was very delicious.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Yeah, you definitely went to merch shop and saw him. Now the owner of a Carson Teva inspired New Republic Ranger badge. I don't really push the title, but
yeah. We raced home from Disney on Sunday. Ken very kindly helped me record a piece I needed for a short film, and I knew he was going to do that, so I needed to get Ken a gift. So I bought him something that he's like, I can't buy that for myself, but I want to buy it. Ooh, I'll buy it for Ken. It's perfect. So that was very great.
It's on display on my shelf. Now, I want to clarify, folks. I didn't say I'll help only if I get a gift. I didn't say that, but Joseph was out of the kindness of his heart. Got me this gift. Wonderful stuff, folks. We're going to get into some Star Wars news, some late breaking news this morning over coffee. They're starting to announce some of the guests who will be appearing at Star Wars Celebration London, which is just around the corner. April. Some great names, including Anthony Daniels, Vivian Alira Blair, Indira Varma, among others. So look for that stuff. If you're into that, go to the website, StarWars.com, and they have more information there. But let's get to some of our news stories. Got some fun stories today. We got some fun speculating, rolling around in some Star Wars discourse that was going around last week, but some fun stuff. This is the Thrawn of it all. The Thrawn of it all. Lars Mikkelsen, Lars, he voices Thrawn in Rebels, has said that he has not received an offer to play live-action Thrawn in Ahsoka. I can almost hear Thrawn's voice saying that. I've not received an offer. So the question is, just to give is he pulling a Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon and Kenobi trick? Is he saying, not me, but he's already been it? Let's start there with some fun. Jen, what's your conspiracy tinfoil hat theory here?
If you hear somebody, it's my husband who's making his breakfast. Apologies, listeners. Okay. In terms of Lars Mikkelsen, I thought his answer was so specific, right? It's one of those things where it's like you just say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. But it's like, I haven't received an offer. That to me is kind of weird. It's a little weird. It's almost like when you're trying to lie to your parents, but you know that if you totally outright lie, like you're not going to be able, like maybe they're in talks, but he hasn't received the offer yet. So that is truthful. He hasn't received an offer, but he is in talks to play this role, right?
Right.
That was interesting for me. Although who knows? You never know with this kind of stuff. But things can always fall through. Schedules can change. But yeah, it did seem a little Liam Neeson-ish.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there. This idea of not received an offer. We've been talking about the offer I'm going to receive for months, but I haven't received it yet. Yep.
Exactly.
Joseph, your thoughts on this? Is he pulling a Qui-Gon?
Oh, I think it is definitely possible. I kind of just love that straight up line is on the table now out of pure necessity, right? Because there's no way to zig or zag around it, right? If you want to hide your involvement, if you're even remotely cheeky, there's just too much attention, right? So it's on the table. Just go, nah, no. Never heard of Lucasfilm. What? I almost took it. I am swayed by Jennifer's argument, but I almost took it as like being almost more honest because it's such an actor thing to say of like, I haven't even got an offer. Like almost like offended, hurt, I have no idea. I would not put any money down on our Canto betting tables that we talk about. My only other thought on the veracity of whether he could be involved in or not is I think he's phenomenal. We'll talk about that. He's very accomplished, but he's not super famous in the United States, so if there was a desire to have a little bit of a casting surprise, pull in a bigger, weirder name, nothing to do with his talent, because I think he's absolutely amazing. I can see there being a desire to cast a little bit of, not stunt casting, but a little bit of that surprise casting, for Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I have for whatever, and Jennifer's argument's great. I just almost want to believe him. Like, nah, maybe this didn't happen. But at the same time, that even saying that out loud doesn't seem right. And it's this kind of weird situation we're always in where who from the voice cast gets put in live action. It's always a interesting discussion. Sometimes it creates some hurt feelings for fans, and I understand that, especially the Ashley Eckstein thing, the biggest of them all. I totally get it, but yeah, it's varied, and I think I didn't look. I haven't seen Lars standing. I don't know, but he seems to be kind of have the Thrawn build and look and feel, right? It seems to me that it could work. He's done such a great job. That Thrawn voice is very specific. So I don't know. I think in this day and age, especially as the show's, I gotta think mostly done. I don't know. I don't know about. I'll have to track the production on that there. I don't know. I think maybe the big left curveball out of left field is that maybe he isn't, and maybe it is Pierce Brosnan. We'll see. Do we have a strong opinion on that? On Lars being Thrawn or anyone else being Thrawn? You made some great points, Joseph, about what they might want to do in terms of casting. People aren't as connected to him as Thrawn as, say, Ashley as Ahsoka, so it might be a little bit different. Jen, your thoughts there on Lars or anyone else?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is Cad Bane and Corey Burton, right, who appeared or voiced the character. I just think that was so specific, and fans were really, really excited about that. With Lars Mikkelsen, I think you're right. He just doesn't quite have that same connection with fans, I guess. I don't know. I know I was surprised when I heard Thrawn's voice because I had read the EU, his stuff in the EU. I had a very specific idea of what his voice would sound like.
Ooh.
It did not match with what Lars Mikkelsen did. I grew to really like it, but it is a very specific thing, and I don't know how it would translate into live action. And I do think you're right, Joseph. Not necessarily stunt casting, but somebody that has some sort of like name recognition that could get fans excited. I mean, I don't know if he would work, but Justin Theroux, I think he could just be really fun. I don't know if he'd have the same kind of like, he's just a different choice. And obviously we loved him in The Last Jedi. But yeah.
Would Lovey be there? Would Lovey be alongside him?
I mean, he'd be blue, so he would look kind of different. But you're right. Yeah. Maybe he does have too distinctive of a look. But
I just on head shape alone, I actually don't think you're wrong. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I'm open to anyone. I'm excited to see who they're going to cast.
I am too. It's interesting about the voice. I've mentioned it before here, but if I had run a Star Wars news website in the early '90s, I would have been selling the lie that Jack Nicholson was going to be Thrawn in 7, 8, 9 because that's what I thought. What I told people was going to happen. It just absolutely got to happen. So I always heard Nicholson, but I think oddly enough, Lars does kind of align with what at least the cadence, not necessarily the sound, but the cadence, I don't know, was kind of linked up for me. But yeah, I think I have to be completely open, and I don't have the attachment to Lars as other characters. So I think I have to be able to just kind of make sense. I don't have the cast list in front of me. There's some other maybe contenders. But yeah, it seems like that's the right approach, Joseph, for myself at least. Just like, hey, could be anyone.
Yeah, I think it could be anyone. I think that Lars is a great match, and I'd be thrilled if he were announced because I think physically he looks the part. He needs to blue up, obviously, but I think the cheekbones, the presence, the general age, everything for me really works. I think he's phenomenal, and I don't know what I imagined Thrawn's voice to be, but this matched up the Rebels' performance. I really like that it was so gentle and silky. I like that he, in my opinion, we'll talk more about this, is a very bad presence in Rebels, a very mean, doing bad things, a character. But he sounded like he was trying to like sell me chocolate or a resort vacation timeshare. I loved how like silky his voice is. And I also like the choice to have it be almost annoying in its quietness, that sort of, that the whisper is almost a tactic. Like, I'm going to speak so down here that I'm going to force everyone to lean in and listen to me. Like, I really like those choices about the voice. So I'd love to see those choices in live action with Lars. But I do think there's a possibility since it's one thing for Bo-Katan, right? When, as Bo-Katan was being premiered already, it was already like that Starbuck, right?
Yeah.
But since none of the other Rebels casts, voice acting cast is moving over, there's also a little bit of like, would that cause any even more discussion if he was the only voice actor who was cast in the live role? So if not Lars, I'd be up for Richard E. Curtis if he hadn't been Legion General Pride.
Ooh, he would have been perfect.
Yeah, I'd be up for Pierce Brosnan. I love him. If we're going down the James Bond route, throw Timothy Dalton on there. That'd be
Dalton. Great.
Yeah,
the cheekbones and the terror, right? He has the cheekbones in the terror. Maybe a little bit older. Who knows how space aging goes? Who knows if you get aged when you get grabbed by a space whale and jump through hyperspace with no protection whatsoever? Who knows what happens to your skin? Or I'd also be happy with the stunt casting of the writer of Iron Man 2, Justin Theroux. That'd be fun with me too.
I'd like that too. Dalton would be great. I'm a slasher of prices. Continuing our hot fuzz lover on these parts there. Yes. Yeah, well said on all your parts there. Yeah, Joseph, you're right. There, if that's if he's the only one to jump over voice to live action. Yeah, I wonder what that would do. But there'd be some celebration for sure. But in the fandom. And why it's pretty safe to say that Thrawn will be at Ahsoka. Ahsoka did say the name in Mandalorian, in the Mandalorian. So we know the name's out there. It's still not official. I was even looking it up. Like, is this, what do we got here? Is this one of those things that just, the fiction becomes the fact? Though again, it tracks here. Do we want them to make it official? There's no, unlike the Liam Neeson one where Qui-Gon showing up was, made sense. I think everyone wanted it. But the fact that they kept that back and kept it secret and Liam played a little coy was, I think, to the benefit of the show. You wanted to get to that moment. It's a little different, though, with Thrawn, where, again, Ahsoka has said the name. We know he and Ezra are out there somewhere. We know they're probably looking. We know Rebels characters are now showing up. It all just kind of tracks. Is this time just say, yes, it is. Thrawn's there, and here's the person playing it. Joseph, do you have any hot takes on that one?
Yeah, I think confirmation is great, and I think it should come when the time is right for the overall publicity machine. I think there was speculation in the article that we read this morning, kind of summarizing some of this, that it might be an Ahsoka trailer during Celebration. That makes a ton of sense, and that would be a great place to reveal it. And if it is an interesting casting choice, having that person walk out on stage, that'd be great. Yeah. That would be really cool. I also think that maybe it's being held back because there's some Ahsoka show overlap in Mandalorian season 3. Maybe that's a timing issue there. I also think there is a slim possibility that, yes, this is kind of the story of Ahsoka season 1 is Thrawn related. She seems determined to find Thrawn, right? But there is a possibility that this is about her journey and Thrawn shows up in the final episode.
Right.
And maybe they're not making a big thing of it because they don't want people to be like, sitting on their couches wearing their Thrawn t-shirts, waving their Thrawn flags, and then he doesn't show up for 5 episodes, Jen,
I'll get your thoughts here, but that's a wonderful point because then he doesn't show up in episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. The discourse starts to build and tension brews over where's Thrawn. We were promised Thrawn. Well, we never said you were promised Thrawn.
And everybody is saying exactly what Ahsoka did. Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?
Right.
There you go. Jen, thoughts on that there?
I think you're so right. And you're coming from a writer's perspective, right? I mean, it's like, it just makes sense that he wouldn't show up right away. You're going to save him towards the end to build to the climax. And I personally, because we are so dialed into everything with Star Wars, I like a surprise. Give me a surprise, And if they want to show a little snippet that he's gonna be in the series, I think just a close up of his blue hand and that white uniform. That's all I need to see. That's only confirmation I need. Save who it is for the actual performance, just because I just want a little surprise. I feel like we know so much about everything, and there's so much speculation that sometimes I'm not able to really sit back and enjoy it because I'm like, oh, yep, confirmation on that. Oh, check box. I don't want to view it like that, right? I mean, maybe some people like it, which is why there's like the Reddit leaks. But I personally, I like to get immersed in the story. I don't know. I go back and forth. Then sometimes I'm like, tell me everything now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also a different era. I saw this discussion a little bit this past week of, there was a time when cast confirmations or even titles or some plot wasn't considered spoilers.
Right.
And I agree with that, but I also think we're in a different time because of the punditry industry, because of podcasts where it ties into some of the discourse of it all, where the speculation takes over, the desires of what you want to see or don't want to see. It just all kind of, that's why I just want to sit down and press play and just take it in as pure as I can. But I do agree that in general, like knowing Thrawn's in it is not a spoiler, but conversation around it could be part of the problem there. It is now some 30 years after we all met the character of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So I think it's a time to check in on this, a little temperature check. Where are we now with him? Jen, you said you, like many people, us included, Joseph and I, read the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire trilogy. Now here on the cusp of a live action Thrawn, what are your thoughts?
I would like to see what I had imagined. I'm going to be one of those people. I don't know. And maybe it's my memory of what I thought he was, not even tied to the actual source material of the EU. I just pictured him to be really evil. And he's a bad guy. Well, we'll talk about that in Rebels. But I don't know. I just expected even more. And so I'm hoping that we get that in the live action, because we'll be able to see the actor's face. We'll be able to maybe see more of his like diabolical thoughts. And even though he is very cultured and all these other things on the exterior, I want to see underneath that evilness, right? Yeah, I don't know. I gotta revisit what I am remembering. I gotta go back and read those books.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time ago. Joseph, let's go back to the early 90s. Take you when you first met him, and then where you at with Thrawn right now?
Yeah, I had an up and down relationship with those books when I read them 30 years ago. I thought Thrawn was like a really cool and different take. Like if we're going to have the Empire resurgent, let's kind of have a different perspective on it all.
Yeah.
So I really like Thrawn. Thrawn was always one of the things that I liked about those books when I bumped up against some other things. I didn't like Obi-Wan leaving. I didn't like little creatures that made force bubbles where Luke couldn't use his powers. Grumble, grumble, grumble. I need to revisit those books. All respect, I know a ton of people love them, so I'm talking about my own personal experience 30 years ago, so an entirely different version of me. So no disrespect to people who love it. But I did always love Thrawn, and I really liked him in Rebels, and I have liked all of the Thrawn books that we have read. I think there's just the core of the character is really solid. The idea of a brilliant, soft-spoken character who looks at the big picture, who's fascinated by the meaning behind art and culture. It's this sort of space Hannibal Lecter vibe that I really like. And I also think that he functions really well to comment on the rest of the galaxy that he's surrounded by. I think he is a critique of the Empire's racism, xenophobia, right? Of not normally allowing someone like him in. He's also a critique of the sort of the incompetence that Palpatine's management style breeds, right? That creating this sort of everybody's just sort of hungry for power, and some people are in the middle of the Empire out of generational wealth or name, and they're not that competent, right? And that's not actually super beneficial for Palpatine. So I love that he is a good picture of that. And I like that he is flawed, that he's analytical to a fault, that particularly in the Rebels episodes, that's done really well, where the only way that he can be defeated is by things that are beyond his ability to analyze and manipulate. He's defeated by the flowing, the organic, the otherworldly, the things he can't control or adjust for, which is the Bendu, which is Ezra's growth and evolution, and the Purgles and that connection, Yeah.
Well said. And yeah, going back in time, I was one of those folks. I always have a great soft spot in my heart for the Heir of the Empire trilogy, even though I, like you, Joseph, over the years, look back, as I've said before here on this podcast, nothing new. Not my favorite style of Star Wars, but there's some things in it, including Talon Card. Oh, I've always liked the character Talon Card. Love all the stuff going on there. But Thrawn, I was one of those, like, I guess I viewed. I don't even know if anti-hero is the right way, but he was cool to root for the bad guy type of vibe, right? And I used to love some of his quotes. There was one back in my memory of something like, "If you have a problem, eliminate the problem," as he ruthlessly kills someone at his side, and I just thought that was cool, right? A little bit of that badass vibe. So I think that my view on that has changed over the years, but I really love the Rebels version of Thrawn is my favorite version. I have not read all of the modern day Thrawn stuff from Zahn. We read the first trilogy, I believe, and there's some great stuff in there. It didn't connect with me as much as it did with other people, but I totally respect the Thrawn fans. I just think, I think my view on the character has changed over the years, where I don't know. I just think there's more interesting things out there, but I do love all the things you're talking about, what you can use him to analyze, including, like you said, the racism within the Empire. That was something that was kind of part of what was going on. I like the setup. If you're going to have someone, especially back in 91, whenever that book came out, he was out in the Outer Rim, unknown regions for 5 years, and then he returns and he's leader of the Empire. It was good counter programming to Palpatine and Vader and all the stuff we knew. What you're saying there, Joseph, of whisper so everyone will listen type of vibe. I really do like that a lot. I think sometimes I rub up against the cult that springs up around characters. That's beyond Star Wars. And that's just something even I have to work with too, within myself. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's bad. That's not the snarky way I want to approach life anymore. I've changed and grown in a lot of areas in that regard. So I have to be more open to just what Thrawn could represent. But it brings us up with a big question. Jen, you sort of touch on it here. It's our final question here around Thrawn. Do you consider him present day a good guy or bad guy, capital G, capital B, somewhere in between? Jen, you kind of said he's not good.
He's a bad guy, but the way he does it is good. He's not like Emperor Palpatine, with Force lightning, like that kind of evil. Do it. He's not like that, right? He's quite frankly, he's a much more relatable evil that we might run across in our own everyday life, which is actually what makes him even scarier in some sense. And he's a bad guy that I like to root for, because like in Rebels, like when he goes on and on, like you just get sucked into his monologues and you get drawn in and you start to try to understand where he's coming from. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually an interesting point. So he's a bad guy, but he's kind of cool. And I think that's why he's had such longevity from the books and then his appearance in Rebels.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it there. Capital B bad. We've learned a lot about him. Again, we'll admit the last 3 Thrawn books I did not take a dive into.
We read the first one.
We read the first trilogy, right? Because is there 6 out now?
Yeah, so we read the first trilogy, and then we read the first book and did a review of the first. There's the second Thrawn book trilogy in modern canon that is at least in that first book dealing with Thrawn and his history with the Chiss. And it starts with how he gets involved in the military and all that. And we read that and reviewed it, and
and that's pretty telling that I don't.
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to be judgmental.
I'll judge myself. I'll judge myself. So I'll pitch it to you to take us home on this, Joseph, here. But this idea, like he's a character I enjoyed learning a lot about where he came from or what his motivations are, and that's even in the first modern day Thrawn trilogy. Working with the Empire to see what he can learn to help his people. I think that's a good starting point, and I think it's important to learn and understand his needs and where he comes from as a character. But at the end of the day, Thrawn, as we have him now, I question his true level of empathy for other folks. I question his motivations, and I question even if you're like, look, I got to work with these guys to get to compromise to help others. I totally get that. But when those other guys are doing the Palpatine path and getting, you see the scope of their evil, and you're like, it's still good. Then I question what your motivations are, and I question who you truly are. So all that to say, I still see Thrawn as very bad, even though he might have had, good intentions, or still does all the way through with his own people and what's going on out there. I think I don't want to wade too far into the waters. I'll start getting folks mad at me for attacking Thrawn, but I still root against him. Is my big point there, Joseph.
Yeah, I really agree with that big picture assessment, Ken, that at the end of the day, he is still choosing to work with the Empire, doing some pretty awful things.
Yeah.
I think, Jennifer, you were touching on something really great, too, of like why we want to root for him is I think there's always a strong desire to just root for competence, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's part of how we got on the side early on in the first season of Andor on Dedra Meero's side, because she was the one who was right. Who was getting things done, who wasn't, bumbling. Mm-hmm. So I think there's this real desire. Like when I did my rewatch of Rebels, I was so invested in the Rebels characters and I so wanted them to win. But at the same time, I'm rooting for Thrawn because his definition is, I've got this. I'm smarter than everyone. And like, yeah, I like that. Be smarter than everyone. Oh, but don't beat my heroes.
Right.
So he's a real, you got to thread a needle writing that character so he is as competent as it says on the tin of Thrawn, but that our heroes can still find a way around him. And I think that's what's so great about his portrayal in Rebels, that it's organic force related things. It's connection and love that he can't quite adjust to. But in terms for me, his own morality, read that the first 3 modern canon books, which I really enjoyed those. They're not my favorite Star Wars, but I really enjoyed them. And I enjoyed that first Thrawn book in that's just Thrawn in with the Chiss ascendancy. We just didn't really have time to dive into the other 2, and frankly, there wasn't a lot of conversation about them out there. So I'm not caught up in those last 2 books, so I know that there might be more nuance to his general agreement to go implant himself in the Empire to make sure that the Chiss ascendancy stays safe. So I understand that maybe there's a couple little details I'm missing, but at the end of the day, even if it is to protect your own people, in my own moral compass, aligning yourself with the Empire and saying, hey, I need to make sure that eventually the Empire is not a threat to my people, so I will help the Empire systematically and brutally murder people, dominate their homes, steal their culture and belongings, and then mock them about it, turn their culture, their most precious items, into a museum where I can figure out how to best kick their ass.
Yeah.
It's super cool storytelling, morally reprehensible in my opinion. And I think for me, it even just kind of tracks to real world stuff about, I have total empathy for the character and his perspective. I have empathy for Anakin and for Ben Solo. I have empathy for people, the humans that I disagree with in the real world, that I can see maybe why they've come to believe the things they believe. And then there's a line on actions, right? I can have empathy for why you got to this place, but I can't support what you're doing in the name of these things that you've come to believe in, right? And I feel the same way about Thrawn, of like, oh wow, I really understand his perspective and I am fascinated with him and almost like him. But it's still wrong that you're coldly murdering and dominating people. I think at the end of the day, Thrawn is still kind of a critique of an overly militaristic society that defines everything by status and domination and strength, because that's where he comes from and that's his perspective.
I really agree with that. I've learned all about your culture so I could wipe you out more efficiently. Is not that I want to go on. But
there's the bumper sticker version of what I was saying once again.
Great stuff. And but Jen's points of he's also kind of cool and pop culture wise, he's a very well-known and interesting character. So it all kind of mishmashes into that. So there you go. That's the Force Center hot takes on the big conversation of the past week about Grand Admiral Thrawn, good guy or bad guy. All our own thoughts. Of course, you can have yours. And hey, let us know if you want to scream at us or whisper like Thrawn would. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. But before we do that, we are going to, that's why I deleted it from my rundown, because last week's episode was different. We are going to give you a Force Center recommends, an audiobook we think you should try out on us. Joseph, can you remember what it was?
I am making sure that I have the correct word. It is Path of Deceit, the next adventure in the High Republic. I was like, is it Path of Vengeance? I know it's Path of Bad Thing. Path of Deceit. We are looking forward to diving in. And if you want to get the audiobook, it really does help us.
It does indeed. You can go get your free audiobook by going to audibletrial.com/Force Center, audibletrial.com/Force Center. All right, quick break. And on the other side, more news here in Star Wars. Welcome back to Force Center. We're looking at Star Wars news, some different stuff this week, and we are going to go now. We're talking about Thrawn. We're going to kind of look ahead to the Ahsoka series as well. Steph Green, is she back in Star Wars? To Instagram we go. I was reading over at StarWarsNewsNet.com. They had this little story here. I thought it was kind of fun. But then I also realized, we don't want to get anyone any more trouble than they might have accidentally got themselves in. We'll see. Late last week, someone noticed that Steph Green, the director behind the moving and affecting Tribes of Tatooine episode of the Book of Boba Fett, had listed that she was part of Ahsoka in her Instagram bio. On January 19th, on or around there, I sound like I've got like some Charlie Day, It's Always Sunny conspiracy board in my background there. On January 19th, her bio read Emmy and Oscar-nominated filmmaker, which she is, Watchmen, Ahsoka, New Boy, which is her short film. Then this story kind of ran, and it kind of made the rounds around the social media. And as of this weekend, the bio just reads Emmy and Oscar-nominated filmmaker. So, like I said, look, I don't want to put any extra pressure on her. She's probably really excited, and I love updating bios. That's the way you tell friends, look at the cool things I'm working on. But, this is the Star Wars world, the pop culture world. So, with respect, as much respect as we can put on Steph Green, let's have a discussion about this, because the possibility of a true talent like herself getting to play in the Star Wars galaxy again is, I would think, a good thing. But let's dive into this with some thoughts about Steph Green and Ahsoka. Joseph.
Yeah, I really hope this is true, because I think she's just phenomenal. We'll talk more about her Book of Boba Fett episode. I don't. In the grand scheme of things, I think this is kind of a standard Hollywood thing right now. Hollywood really wants everyone involved in a production to have a huge social media following. They are looking for people who can help do promotion that they don't have to pay for. Yep. So I think at this point in time, it's extremely easy to get wires crossed between agents, publicists, the company, etc. Maybe things like I'm also keeping in mind with the director like Steph Green too, like the latest job helps get the next job, right? So maybe it's like you sent the flare up from Lucasfilm that you can say you directed an Ahsoka episode in meetings. Oh, whoops, you can't say it online though, it turns out. Right. All that kind of thing. In big picture, I want this to be true, because I think her episode of Book of Boba Fett is phenomenal. But I also just want this Star Wars path to continue that started on Disney Plus, that started with Mandalorian exploding outward, of bringing in lots of new talent to play. And, when they knock it out of the park, they keep developing that relationship with Lucasfilm. It's such a hard thing to find directors who have a really, really great voice, a really great perspective that they bring to it, but also can play in this, weird shared universe sandbox. So I hope that this is true. And then I hope we get an announcement of the Quinlan Vos show directed by Steph Green.
I love that. Yeah. And well said on just the nature of the business. And look, she's someone who's out there busy working, and her follower count isn't huge because she's not making TikTok videos, or she's getting Emmy and Oscar nominations through her work. And so I just got to imagine she's like, I'm going to put this on. No one follows me anyways. And then suddenly shows like us are discussing, which I really do feel slightly bad, but I wanted to discuss it because I'm super excited about this possibility. I'm like you, Joseph, I really want this to be true. Her episode, that second episode, was so beautiful and helped change my view on what they were, what that series was going to do. It helped me kind of get, here's what they're going for. And I thought it was real powerful and in a special kind of way. So I'm just excited to have her potentially around, Jen,
Yeah, I love that. And I like that they are creating this kind of stable of directors, writers that they can bring back and have them work on a different show and see what their take is for that. It's just, it creates also a shorthand, because I imagine working within the Star Wars framework is not easy. And then production wise, I'm sure that, it's a tight timeline and they've got a lot to achieve. That's why a lot of people, well, specifically, I think it was Jon Favreau was saying how, or maybe it was Dave Filoni was saying how incredible it was that Robert Rodriguez did with his finale episode. He's like, he accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. I couldn't believe he got all the shots. So it is not easy. And I'm looking forward to, if this is true, and good for her for putting it out there. I mean, it just is the way our industry works, as you said, Joseph, it's just like you have to have a social media presence, even if you're a director. And if she shares like a behind the scenes shot, oh my God, she's going to get a ton of followers, just in that. And already I'm sure she's picked up some followers just for whoever spotted that in her bio. But I'm excited. I'm happy. And I think that she's excited, and that makes me excited. So it's a win-win.
Win indeed. Yeah. I was, it's I kind of almost amused by, God, you're just so busy being awesome that you just don't realize that people actually want to see what you're working on or following. Star Wars fans have glommed onto your work, and it's good. And yeah, we want to talk a little bit more detail here about what we did love about her episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Her arrival in Star Wars, her work on The Watchmen was very well received, and she's got a great resume. So a lot of people were looking at her work, and this episode shows up. And Jen, you've said several times you just absolutely love this show, The Book of Boba Fett, which I'm right there with you on that. I've gotten into many bar arguments over this show now because I have a special place in my heart for it. But your thoughts on that specific episode?
I love this episode. It had so much that really set the tone for the series for me. You had, the Thorian mayor. You had the comedy with Major Domo. You had the, hot cousins. There's so much that happens. And then, of course, we learn more about the Tusken culture, which for me, it changed my whole view of the Tusken Raiders. And we learn more about Boba Fett. I fell in love with Boba Fett as a character when I had never really cared about the character. I always thought he was cool. But getting to see him be a part of this group and earn his place and help them, it just was really beautiful. All with action and comedy and creatures and aliens. That's what I love about Star Wars. To me, it's like, okay, if this is what she's going to bring to Ahsoka, oh my gosh, I can't wait.
Love that there. I'll just say quickly, adding on what I said earlier, even about this episode, it's just, the powerful, the imagery, what am I watching? Is it real? Is it imagined? I'm inside Boba Fett's, spiritually overwhelmed head on this journey. Am I seeing something that exists? What is it? And beyond just the details or how it links up thematically other parts of Star Wars or what it did with Boba Fett, I'm with you, Jen. I've always liked Boba Fett, but now I had a different kind of view and different kind of respect for the character. You think back of that series, images flash to your head like, well, I do like this. Do I like the multicolored bright bikes? Do I or not? I don't know, but I remember them. And Chrysanthemum and the twins. You're talking about the twins. Those big Star Wars,
yes.
the Star Wars images pop your head. But then, and I can talk about Garza Fwip and her monologue and Danny Trejo and his monologue and all that stuff. But like, I just think of that sequence and the beauty of it and just kind of sitting back and just reveling in just the spiritual side, the quest for identity, the culture stuff that you're talking about. As a longtime Star Wars fan, to have this be one of the moments where I go, I don't even know if I can call them Tusken Raiders anymore. They're the Tuskens of the Dune Sea to me. It changed my view of something and handled just this wonderful, just connective, themes and vibes and performances all the way through. And that's what I'll remember for her stuff there. So, Joseph, I'm sure you also have a powerful memory.
I do. The only thing that could have made the second episode of Book of Boba Fett better for me is if the colorful scooters were also in that. The customizable Grav scoots. I know people don't like them, but I love them, and they make sense to me, and they made me watch the movie Quadrophenia, which is now one of my favorite movies. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. I think the second episode of Book of Boba Fett is one of the best written. I think it is really great on the page, but I think the job of a director, particularly in a situation like this, is, okay, I see and understand and vibe with what the script wants to communicate. So how can I best communicate that? How can I make what's in the writer's minds, what I see, in between the lines? How can I make the audience feel the hell out of that? And I think that's what she really did so effectively. You feel everything, right? You feel Boba's desire to belong with the Tuskens, right? There is genuine, honest comedy in a good way in the learning to communicate. I know some people don't like a bantha, but that's so honest,
Right.
you know, and it's about trying to find like, what's common between us? How can we learn to communicate? Right. The way the action scene is shot, that train sequence is high stakes, thrilling, fun. It pops. Then you have like the weird, dreamy terror of Boba Fett's quest into the desert. And then I think the thing that just super elevates that episode, and I believe they talked about it, that it wasn't originally in the script, that it was originally just Boba Fett, gets his gaffy stick, right? Makes it, right? But it needed more, right? To make the audience feel what Boba Fett feels, to feel the respect for the Tuskens of the Dune Sea. And that scene at the end of the ceremony, right?
Right.
Boba Fett's journey is clear, sort of factually. When he has the quest, he brings the stick back. It's transformed into the gaffy stick. But that ceremony at the end, it's joy, it's honor, it's culture, it's connection, it's everything. It's every idea that's in that script, and it makes us viscerally feel it on an emotional level. And I think that's the part that just super elevates this episode of Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I think a year removed from it now or so, when you go to the credits on that episode and that ritual's happening and everything, I just, I was emotionally moving in a way I'll never forget that first experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, we're excited for the possibility of Steph Green to return to Star Wars and, bring her talents to Ahsoka. So, we'll monitor her Twitter, her Instagram and her Twitter, or we'll monitor her Instagram bio. We'll monitor all the bios going forward there. One quick story to cover here. I couldn't turn away from this one. And Jen, I credit you with that there. We're going to talk about another Star Wars series returning, a second season. It's not being talked about enough, but it's Galaxy of Creatures. That's right. The creature-obsessed droid SFR3, aka RE, is back for another season of Galaxy of Creatures on Star Wars Kids, the YouTube channel there. 4 episodes have already been aired at the time of this episode dropping, including a look at a Force Center fave, the Eopie, which I just watched this morning, and it's spectacular. But 8 more are on the way, including looks at puffer pigs and a Dianoga. Jen, we are going to start with you. How much do you value these shows and series like this one?
I value them so much because it's just a way for me to be able to, share it with my kids, because they're into their own things. And I don't want to force Star Wars on them. I want it to be like an organic thing. And when they have questions, I'll share them. But for me, the Galaxy of Creatures and the Galactic Pals, which are the toy tie-in, have been a great way for me to connect with them on Star Wars. And, they're not picky in terms of like short content versus like, a 22-minute episode of something. They don't care. They like it all. And so it's fun that now I can introduce them to the Eopie and puffer pigs and a Dianoga, which scared my daughter. So now I can show her, see, they're cute and maybe cuddly. I mean, I'm looking forward to when they bring some more Galactic Pals, because right now I think there's only 4. So I want to see what they're going to bring next.
I might have to start collecting those there. Going back to my stuffed animal collecting youth. I might want some modern day versions. Well said, Jen. Yeah, I think you've expressed some of these films before, and I saw this and I just smiled because I think I've just become even more protective of how people discover Star Wars and how that keeps Star Wars going. And this is something that does that. And Joseph, you and I, as we've said many times before, we don't have kids, but we can find value in these type of shows as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a more personal experience if it was about my own children, but it's so great to me to see that as an entry point into Star Wars. I think the beasts are a great way to make the galaxy feel real and lived in. Mm-hmm. And I like the way that some of the beast content is almost like Sesame Street for Star Wars, of like, here are some facts. Do you want to memorize them? Do you want to pick a favorite? I think it gives kids a sense of control and a sense of knowledge, right? To become like, I'm the 6-year-old who knows everything about Eopes, and I'm going to tell everyone I meet.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of vibe. And it's hitting home to me because well, I bought something at a stall in Galaxy's Edge and noticed like there was this free booklet that I'd never seen. And it was the creature stall owner's guide to the creatures of Batuu. And it's a little scavenger hunt. When I saw scavenger hunt, I was like, oh boy, teach kids to scan QR codes, grumble, grumble, grumble. And it was just totally physical. It was just like, there's a Diagnoga in this part. Here's of the park. Here's some things about the Diagnoga. And it totally hooked me because like, I was just flipping through it quick and it's like, do you know that there's an Eope on the forest path? And talking to my wife and like, we've looked, there's no Eope. And then I finally realized like, oh, it's just the Eope's footprints in the past. So like, it worked on me. A child in his 40s. It worked on me to find the Eope and go like, and then I was pointing out to my wife's parents, I found the Eope, and like, that's nice. Great.
Yeah, right there with you on it, on the joy brings, and then just putting yourself into the soul of a 6-year-old or something, watching this video and then watching the Phantom Menace and being like, oh, that's an Eope. Let me tell you about it. And even the video itself, I was impressed that the Eopes. We think of them either in the pod race or with Kenobi, but they're often on their own, surviving the wilds of Tatooine, which includes a lot of monsters and gaping maws in the sand where you could fall in and die. Like there's in this video, kind of in a very nice child safe way, discussed the survival skills of the Eope. And so even I was like, I have a newfound respect for a creature I already love, but I know a little bit more about him, and just to know that that's what these videos do. And we really just celebrate Star Wars on all levels for all people, and this is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are done with the news. But before we leave, we got a quick look ahead into Star Wars history, looking ahead to Star Wars past. This week in Star Wars history, on January 27th, 1983, George Lucas officially announced that the title of the upcoming quote-unquote final chapter in the Star Wars saga would now be called Return of the Jedi, not the previously announced and advertised Revenge of the Jedi. Now, I will say that some stories have George, quote, deciding this in December of 1982, which does seem to sync up with stories, but this is when it was official. This is one of the all-time great bits of Star Wars trivia that many of us lived through. So I want to go back in time there. Where were you when you heard the news? Jen, you and I might have a different relationship to it with Joseph, who's just got a little bit of time advantage on us. Not a lot, just a little bit. It changes how you take in some of that news. So Jen, what did you think when you heard this?
I don't know. I only knew. Right? I don't even remember. I only have flashes of memories actually seeing Return of the Jedi in theater because I was little. I do remember when I learned it when I was older, and I think I was like a teenager. And I loved it. And I remember people had even made like patches at that time. I'm sure that they still have patches. And I just thought it was a cool piece of trivia that I, a true Star Wars fan, knew. I wore that very proudly. And of course, Blue Harvest, which also was used during the making of Return of the Jedi to try and throw people off. I think it was even like on merchandise, like crew t-shirts and stuff like that. So just, it was a thing that made me feel like I could, show my nerd badge. Like I knew it was Revenge of the Jedi.
I have a stack of those Revenge of the Sith patches, and my friend Van William got them for me for a birthday a few years ago. He found them; they're legit, and I use one of them as a bookmark. So I don't know if that's if that is honoring the patch or not, but I love that those patches exist. So I'm with you. I don't remember, and definitely remember seeing Return of the Jedi, but like I don't remember the moment I learned this, other than I put the question in, was it confusing? Because it was confusing for me. I do remember seeing it in a Sears catalog. I'm going deep into my memory banks.
Wow.
So Sears catalog, I was one of those kids who'd sit down and stare at the old wish book and wonder what I'm going to get for Christmas, and all the possibilities of playing are in front of me. And there was a Revenge of the Jedi thing where like, well, that's not right. It's called Return of the Jedi. I've seen it. I know. This book is wrong, and I was confused. So not too long, or much longer later, I think I learned about it, and it still kind of remained confusing. But it was one of those first things. Jen talking about nerd badge or nerd cred, which is an interesting world to talk about. But it was definitely on the playground. Did you know? And I love that, and that kind of starts it. I consider that kind of the early when that hits you early in your Star Wars fandom as a kid, no matter what generation you're from, you start learning that stuff. It just kind of built its own tradition of knowing the behind the scenes stuff in Star Wars. So Joseph, we're painting you as this older, wiser kid on the playground who might have been aware of this. But was that the case?
Yeah, I mean, it always comes up in these discussions of between Empire and Return of the Jedi, because I think I'm 2.5 years older than you guys, and it's just the window that makes all the difference when we were talking about this. I vividly remember the Revenge of the Jedi stickers on Empire Strikes Back action figures. So the action figures for Return of the Jedi had not come out yet. This is that era when the joke I make about a wall of sad Lobots of, it's been a while since Empire Strikes Back, and the only things left on the shelves are the not exciting figures, right? It was Lobots and Cloud Car Pilots, and I already had the Cloud Car Pilot, but suddenly there was something fresh on these action figures, which was a sticker to send away for Admiral Akbar, whoever the hell that is, but he's going to be featured in the film Revenge of the Jedi. And I am not making this up. It didn't make sense to me as a kid, because I felt so. I received Yoda's lecture to Luke in Empire Strikes Back about a Jedi doesn't crave, excitement and adventure, all these things that it's not about that, right? Because I wanted adventure and excitement. It's like, well, Yoda, I guess Yoda thinks there's some other way to look at it. I guess I'll try to figure that out. So it didn't make sense to me as a kid that it would be revenge, because that didn't seem like Jedi. But we've talked about this a ton. Like growing up in the era that we did, lots of things were just kind of a little off. Like it was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and there was never any indication about the rest of the universe. They were just on one planet. Like, okay, the Star Wars books said from the further adventures of Luke Skywalker, and no matter how much you hunted in used bookstores, you couldn't find these alleged adventures. Even the action figures we're talking about, Luke's lightsaber was yellow. It was just a time where things were just wrong. So when I was a kid, I was like, it's revenge. That doesn't seem right. But lots of things are wrong. Which leads into I think what we're gonna talk about here about was this the right choice for that Lucas made?
Yes, absolutely. Was it the right choice? Or I think even old Larry Kasdan disagreed. I'm trying to remember some interviews there where he thought it was the stronger title. And you mentioned a lot, Joseph. At some point, we're all kind of raised that when you're writing your essays for high school, you leave opinions out of it stated as fact, which I think is where I agree with you a lot. There's a lot of a genesis of our problems come from that there, I think. It's the genesis of the problems. But all that aside, not to fight or pick on Larry Kasdan there, I definitely stand by this decision. Return of the Jedi is absolutely what it should have been, which I think is what he wanted it to be in the beginning, Jen, right? You track this stuff every now and then when you put together your wonderful Happy Beeps episodes. I think George went back to what he wanted.
I think so. Gosh, I'd have to revisit that. But doesn't it make so much more sense that now we have Revenge of the Sith? Now that makes sense. How like you're saying, Joseph, how could never be Revenge of the Jedi? That's like the opposite of who the Jedi are. So I'm glad that he went back to Return of the Jedi so that we could get Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Right. Yoda's, you'll know the difference between the light side and the dark side when you're calm, passive. When you get revenge, like it just
yeah. What does that tell kids? Right? Get revenge like a Jedi. Oh boy.
It's one of those things that just seems so right, and it's hard to go back. I think this one's. I know it's like the name of a band where you're like, well, they were almost called the Poppin' Corns, and that's the story of Van Halen. What? Like what? What are you talking about? That wouldn't have worked. Which is, by the way, folks, that's a totally made up fact. I'm not saying that.
I was like, really? I didn't know that.
They had some other names too, but I'll ask Mark Ellis. Or the Beatles and Silver Beatles, where it's just like, what was is what worked. But we had this example. I'm staring at it in a toy book, and so it just always stood out. And I thought, I think there was a moment later on in my life, and I'm not even talking about high school. I think like 9, 10, where it did dawn on me. Oh yeah, this makes more sense. Return is right. That's what Luke did versus the Revenge. I didn't get the depth and meaning of it till later. But so yes, I definitely agree with George's choice. But Joseph, as you've always stated, you were on the playground going, folks, listen to Yoda.
Yeah. In my imagination, I was. I don't think anyone would have listened to me on the playground about anything. But yeah, I've always when it was. I don't think I was sitting down and watching Entertainment Tonight or whenever this announcement was made. I think the books came out and the action figures came out and it was Return. I was like, awesome, that's so much better, as a kid. But then I've only grown to love it more as an adult. This is, in my opinion, one of the single best and most amazing things that George Lucas has ever done. To really understand the position that he was in, even though the films were incredibly successful, that every one was make or break, right? The idea that he could look at that amount of pressure, it really is Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi facing down the entire First Order, all by himself, to look at all that marketing, all the stuff that had already come out, all that business machinery that wants this. Revenge of the Jedi, for marketing purposes, is no doubt, especially in 1983, the far more exciting title. Return sounds like were the Jedi out to get groceries? Great. We're used to it now, but from that perspective, revenge is the obvious answer. Come on. Don't be a fool. Don't be a stick in the mud, So for Lucas to stand there and go, yes, I know it is technically the better title. It is the more exciting title. It is the title that might make more money, but it's wrong to my film. It's wrong to my message. I set out to share a myth with children of all ages, and that's not the message. That's really amazing. It's really amazing.
No, really agree with that. We always talk about just a simple Luke throwing down his blade in the time of Rambo and Rocky and beyond. And I'm not here to pick on Sly Stallone. I'm just saying that was a different time. And that's part of, I think, what we should celebrate about Return of the Jedi. So well said. We'll get back to the playground and tell everyone about this here. That is it for this week. We're on our way out of here, but here's where you can find us. We're on Twitter. It's Force Center Pod. Hive Social, Force Center, if you're still on there. Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. Instagram and YouTube. Don't forget, live show next Q&A, January 27th, 3 p.m. Pacific. Podcast available on a lot of spots and spats, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. You can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center. You can also follow me by going to at @KedNapSock or my website, KedNapSock.com. Got my new podcast, The Blathering, up and out on the Napsock Network podcast feed. Jennifer, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and YouTube. Those are my two primary focuses right now. I'm trying to upload more short form content beyond just Star Wars, perhaps. Maybe doing some movie and TV reviews outside of Star Wars, which would be shocking for me. And also TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
Love that. I endorse that.
Yeah. I'm very excited for that, Jennifer. I think listeners are excited to hear some of our non-Star Wars opinions as well, because we all contain multitudes when watching television and movies.
That's right.
You can find me on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram in particular. I'm trying to highlight Hive, Mastodon, the others, whatever they are now. I don't know. I'm probably there under Joseph Scrimshaw. At Joseph Scrimshaw is my handle everywhere. And you can also follow me, check me out on YouTube. You can just search for Joseph Scrimshaw on YouTube. I have a new short that I'm going to be putting up hopefully in late January or early February, later today. I'm going to try to lock that date down. So if you're going to Force Center to subscribe to us on YouTube, check out my channel as well.
There you go, my friends. All right, that is it for Larry Kasdan and his debate with George Lucas. We'll see you next time here on Force Center.